There is a story as old as humanity itself. A young man once stood at the edge of a battlefield, sword in hand, yet trembling not at the thought of his enemy, but at the weight of his own heart. He asked himself a question that would haunt him. Am I fighting for survival, or am I fighting for meaning? This question, though carried by soldiers and wanderers of the past, lives inside each of us, for in some way we are all warriors, not necessarily with armor and steel, but with burdens, with fears, and with the endless conflicts within our own minds. Carl Jung, the great psychologist, once said, "Where there is no struggle, there is no strength." He understood that the figure of the warrior is not only a myth or a historical archetype, it is a living symbol of human psychology. To Jung, the warrior is not about violence or domination. The warrior is about transformation. It is about the courage to confront the darkest parts of oneself and to walk into the unknown when every instinct begs you to retreat. Think about your own life for a moment. How many battles have you fought that no one else could see? The sleepless nights, the doubts, the silent wars inside your chest. We tend to dismiss these struggles as weakness, but Jung would tell us that these invisible battles are what shape the warrior within. The true warrior is not born in victory, but in the relentless confrontation with fear. Jung believed that deep within the human psyche lies the archetype of the warrior. It is not something we choose, it is something woven into the very fabric of our existence. Myths across cultures have always carried this image: the knight, the samurai, the hunter, the rebel, the protector. Each is a mirror of the same inner figure, the same timeless force that asks us to rise when the world tries to break us. But here is the paradox. The warrior is not just strength. The psychology of a warrior requires vulnerability. If you have never tasted fear, then bravery has no meaning. If you have never carried doubt, then faith has no weight. Jung emphasized this balance. To be whole, a warrior must not deny fear, but embrace it, not crush emotion, but channel it. The warrior's power comes not from the absence of weakness, but from the conscious decision to step forward despite it. This is what separates the mere fighter from the true warrior. A fighter battles to conquer others. A warrior battles to conquer himself. In today's world, we may not carry swords, but the challenges are no less real. Every day, people fight battles of identity, of uncertainty, of loss and hope. The warrior archetype comes alive each time someone chooses to face difficulty instead of running from it. Every student pushing through failure, every parent carrying responsibility, every individual daring to follow a dream. This is the warrior living in modern form. Jung's psychology teaches us that this archetype is not simply about willpower, but about integration. The warrior is not whole until it knows what it is fighting for. Without purpose, strength turns destructive, but with meaning, even suffering becomes sacred. This is why the warrior figure often walks a lonely road. It is not about external applause, but about inner truth. Close your eyes for a moment and imagine the warrior in you. What does it look like? Perhaps it is not armored at all. Perhaps it carries scars, trembling hands, or a wounded heart. And yet, despite its wounds, it moves forward. That is the essence Jung wanted us to recognize. The warrior is not perfect. It is human. Jung himself lived through turbulent times, witnessing both world wars and the collapse of old ways of thinking. He understood that the battlefield of nations is often a reflection of the battlefield inside the human soul. Each conflict outside mirrors the conflicts within, between light and shadow, between fear and courage, between despair and hope. And so he urged humanity not to ignore the warrior archetype, but to learn from it. At the heart of this psychology lies the confrontation with the shadow. Jung's shadow is everything within us that we deny, repress, or refuse to acknowledge. The warrior's role is to face that shadow, to confront what is dark without being consumed by it. Many people think of strength as avoidance, pretending weakness doesn't exist. But Jung showed us that the true warrior looks directly into the abyss and says, "I will not run." Consider history's great stories of warriors, the samurai who trained not only in combat, but in poetry and philosophy, the knights bound by codes of honor, the myths of heroes who descended into darkness before they could rise. Each of these reflects the Jungian truth that the warrior's path is not only about battle, it is about depth, discipline, and meaning. And yet, in our modern age, we sometimes forget this. We confuse aggression with courage and noise with strength. But Jung's psychology of the warrior reminds us of something timeless, that the true power of the warrior is inner clarity, to know who you are, what you value, and what you are willing to endure. That is the foundation of resilience. Ask yourself now, what is the battle you are fighting? Is it the battle to accept yourself, to overcome fear of failure, to protect those you love, to find purpose in a world that often feels chaotic? Each of these is the warrior's calling, and each time you choose to stand and face these struggles, you are embodying the archetype Jung spoke of. There is a beautiful irony in the psychology of the warrior. The more you fight for truth, the less you need to fight at all. The warrior who has confronted their own shadow no longer seeks endless conflict. They find peace not by avoiding battle, but by walking through it. This peace is not passive, it is earned like scars on the soul. Jung's insights help us see that the warrior archetype is not only for those who seek greatness, but for every human being who dares to live authentically. To be a warrior in Jung's sense is to confront pain with meaning, to embrace fear with courage, and to hold steady in the storms of life without losing sight of the horizon. Think again of that young man on the battlefield, sword trembling in his hand. His story is our story, for each of us has stood at the edge of some decision, uncertain if we have the strength to go on, and yet, in those very moments, something ancient stirs inside us. The psychology of the warrior awakens, not as perfection, but as the courage to keep moving forward. And that is where the journey begins, because the path of the warrior is not about one battle, but about a lifetime of choices. Each day you rise, each fear you face, each truth you claim, that is the warrior's march. And as Jung would remind us, it is not the outcome that makes you a warrior. It is the willingness to step into the unknown with an open heart and an unshaken spirit. But here is the truth many of us forget. The warrior's greatest battle is not with the world, but with time itself. Life is not a single duel. It is a long campaign, full of seasons of growth, loss, doubt, and renewal. The psychology of the warrior is about learning to endure, to rise again when weariness threatens to drown the spirit. Carl Jung believed that life moves in patterns. He saw the human journey as an unfolding story, where every stage demands a different kind of courage. In youth, the warrior archetype often appears in rebellion, the drive to break free, to prove oneself against the odds. Later, the same archetype might appear as discipline, the patience to build, to protect, to sustain. And in later years, the warrior often shifts again, becoming wisdom, the courage not to fight every battle, but to choose which battles are truly worth waging. This evolution is essential, because the psychology of a warrior is not about endless aggression. It is about alignment. It is about discovering which struggles are meaningful and which only drain the soul. The immature warrior fights everything. The mature warrior fights with purpose. Jung's writings often hinted at this difference. A life without conscious direction becomes chaotic, but a life guided by meaning becomes powerful. Ask yourself, how many times have you fought battles that were not truly yours? Arguments that drained you, pursuits that left you empty, proving yourself in ways that no longer mattered. This is where Jung's wisdom enters. The warrior must turn inward to listen, to ask, what is the meaning of this struggle? Does it serve my deeper self, or does it pull me away from it? This is where we confront another layer of Jungian psychology, the archetype of the self. For Jung, the warrior was never an isolated figure. It was always in service to something greater. The true warrior fights not for ego, but for the self, for wholeness, for authenticity, for the deeper truth of being. Without this anchor, strength collapses into vanity, but with it, every action, every sacrifice carries the weight of meaning. History offers us countless reminders of this. Think of the great leaders who inspired not by fear, but by vision. Think of those who bore hardship not to glorify themselves, but to protect or uplift others. Their strength was not brute force, it was psychological clarity. And that is exactly what Jung taught. The warrior's true weapon is not the sword, but the soul aligned with purpose. Yet, here lies the paradox. To live as a warrior of the psyche is not easy. It requires solitude, reflection, and an unflinching look at one's own weaknesses. Jung described individuation, the process of becoming whole, as a kind of inner battle. To integrate the shadow, to accept the unloved parts of oneself, is one of the greatest acts of courage, because it is easier to project blame onto the world than to face the fractures within. But the warrior does not choose the easy path. The warrior chooses the path of honesty, even when it hurts. Perhaps this is why so many myths show the hero descending into darkness before emerging into light. These stories are not about dragons and demons alone. They are about us. They are about the descent into our own shadows, into grief, shame, or fear, and the return not as the same person, but as someone transformed. The warrior's story is the human story, to descend, to endure, to rise. And yet, in rising, the warrior learns humility. Jung often warned about the danger of power without self-awareness. A warrior who has not faced his shadow becomes dangerous, not only to others, but to himself. But a warrior who has looked into the abyss and survived no longer seeks to dominate. He seeks to serve. This is the highest form of the archetype. The warrior as protector, not destroyer. Think of the moments in your own life when you have stood as protector, maybe not with shields or weapons, but with your presence, your words, your choices. When you defended a friend against despair, when you stood by someone who was breaking, when you protected a dream that others dismissed, that was the warrior in you. And though it may not have been recognized, it mattered, because every act of protection, every stand for truth, leaves a mark on the soul. This is the heart of Jung's psychology of the warrior, to live not only for oneself, but for the deeper reality we are all part of. To understand that every battle faced with integrity strengthens not only the individual, but the collective spirit of humanity. And yet, even with this noble vision, the warrior's path remains lonely. Jung knew this. He wrote often about the burden of those who walk ahead of their time, who confront truths that others prefer to ignore. The warrior archetype demands solitude, not as punishment, but as a necessary ground for growth. In silence, we hear the whisper of the self. In solitude, we discover what we are truly made of. But here lies the beauty. The warrior never walks entirely alone. The archetype connects us to generations past, to myths and ancestors, to the timeless story of humanity. Every culture, every age has honored the warrior, not for conquest, but for courage. When you embody this archetype, you join a lineage older than history. You become part of a greater song. So what does this mean for you, here and now? It means that your struggles matter. The difficulties you face are not meaningless accidents, but opportunities to embody the warrior. Each time you rise when you could fall. Each time you choose honesty when it would be easier to hide. Each time you keep walking when the path grows dark. You are fulfilling something ancient and profound. This is not about perfection. The warrior makes mistakes, stumbles, even fails, but failure does not disqualify the warrior. It deepens him. Jung believed that wounds, when integrated, become sources of power. The scar does not weaken the warrior. It proves endurance. Perhaps today you feel weary. Perhaps you wonder if you have the strength to continue. If so, remember this. The warrior does not always roar. Sometimes the warrior is the quiet voice that says, "I will try again tomorrow." That whisper, however fragile, carries more strength than an army. And this is the final truth. The psychology of a warrior is not about becoming invincible. It is about becoming whole. It is about weaving courage and vulnerability, strength and compassion, shadow and light, into a single life that radiates authenticity. Jung knew that wholeness, not perfection, is the goal. The warrior is not flawless. The warrior is fully human. So as you walk into your own battles, seen and unseen, carry this with you. You are part of an ancient lineage of warriors. Your struggles are not meaningless. Your courage is not invisible. Each act of endurance, each moment of clarity, each choice to keep moving forward adds to the story of humanity itself. And maybe, just maybe, one day you will look back at your life and realize something extraordinary. That you were not only surviving, not only enduring, you were living the psychology of a warrior. And that in itself is the most noble victory of all.